Hey y'all, thanks for checking us out today. This is a Superwoman Handbook, and we have Melody with us today. And she's going to talk about diabetes from the patient perspective and the caregiver perspective because she's lived both roles. And we're excited to hear about it today, Melody.
Yeah, so I do. I live both sides, and thank you for having me today.
Let's start with your experience with your daughter because you were a caregiver first.
So, my daughter is 41 years old now, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 8. So, she's been living with it for quite some time. Back when she was diagnosed, they didn't have a lot of the technical advancements that parents use today. So she did 7 to 8 finger sticks a day, multiple shots. And then we really had to watch her diet just to make sure we kept everything in line. So we found out about my daughter in a very interesting way. Looking back, I know the signs now because I've been managing diabetes or talking about diabetes for over 33 years. But she was little, and most parents, when their children are little, they go through growing spurts, right? I mean, they get thinner and then they shoot up, and you don't really pay attention because you see them every day. And so I noticed she was drinking more water than she normally would drink, but it was summertime and it was hot and she was active. So I just kind of dismissed it. I had then started a brand new job, and the job was very demanding. And so I was going through the first month of 6 weeks of probationary period, and I was focused on my job and trying to make sure, I learned what I needed to learn. And she started to wet the bed, and she'd never wet the bed before, never. And so I thought, that's really odd, really odd. And then I attributed it to me working a little longer hours. I wasn't giving her or her brothers the attention that I normally gave them. But then there's a gut feeling that a mom gets, like something just isn't lining up. So I had her father take her to the doctor. And sure enough, they said, your daughter has a urinary tract infection. Well, of course she did. The sugar was spilling through her urine, and, she had a UTI. So they gave us an antibiotic and said to treat it. And we lived in a slight rural area. So there were crops and, different things around us. So we always had to be mindful when it came to ants, mice, that kind of thing in the house. And so after the dose of antibiotics, I gave it to her for maybe 24 hours. I went to wake her up to go to school, and she had taken her panties off that she had wet that night, and they were on the floor and they were covered in ants. And I thought, why are my baby's panties covered in ants? What is going on? So I had her dad take her back to the doctor's office. And when he told them that she was lethargic and hard to get out of bed and her panties were covered in ants, it was as if a green light came on with them. And it was 2 weeks of complete chaos in the pediatric intensive care unit where they immediately admitted her. As a mother, my daughter and I, we chat about this over, lunch and whatnot. I was like a deer in the headlights. I didn't know what diabetes was. It didn't run in my family. They were throwing all this terminology and all these things at me. I'm sitting in the little chair as she's plugged into everything as they bring her glucose down, and they hand me a needle and an orange, and they tell me you need to get used to injecting your daughter, and the orange feels a lot like her skin does when you go to poke it. So that, that was the introduction, and that's how my daughter was diagnosed with type 1.
That story just I mean, it's not 1805. Even if it's not like we don't have technology and, things like that. And it's just blows my mind that it had to get to that very obvious place for it to kind of come to light what was going on. If you could maybe help our listeners understand what is type 1 diabetes and how do you catch it? How do you get it?
How do you how do you catch it now?
Well, yeah, like to just maybe kind of walk through just the genetics or, kind of the differences between like type 1 and type 2 diabetes and
So I'm going to go through the little gambit with the different types of diabetes with you, and kind of how they're medically diagnosed, and everyone is a little different. So type 1, they used to tell us that it was called juvenile diabetes or juvenile onset diabetes. and it was usually diagnosed in people under the age of 30. And there normally is like a genetic, somebody in your family has diabetes or that kind of thing. That's not so much anymore. We're getting more and more cases of people that are diagnosed with diabetes that are in their 40s and their late 30s, that kind of thing. And so they are kind of switching it out, that it can happen anytime now. Anybody can get diagnosed with type 1, and you don't have to have a family history. I didn't with my daughter. And then there's type 2. Type 2 is where your pancreas slows down and it makes insulin, but it doesn't make enough insulin to support your needs. So a lot of times it can be managed by diet and exercise if you become insulin resistant, or, sometimes they put people on medication. And in some instances, they do put people on shots, insulin shots. They tell people type 2 can be brought on by excessive weight. It can be brought on by age, and it can just be brought on by just about anything, really. We're seeing more and more of that. So I'm not an endocrinologist. I don't really keep in touch with too much about type 2. And then there is something called gestational diabetes. And that's where women get pregnant and their bodies have enough insulin to support them, but they struggle to support them in the growing life inside them. And so there's tests that are run usually after your first trimester to see how your body's doing. And they normally catch those pretty early in women because it's kind of a test that they do early on now. It's just part of the gambit of being pregnant. And then they treat it mostly with diet, but a lot of times they have different medical interventions with gestational diabetes. And it's interesting because I had gestational diabetes with my daughter. And when she was born 41 years ago, they didn't really check for that much. And so it resulted in her birth weight being over 10 pounds. So now they really watch that in people that are pregnant. And then I really watched it since she was my first child with my other two pregnancies to ensure they weren't so big. So those are kind of the three common ones that people see with diabetes.
And so with your daughter being 7 before you kinda realized, was she, and I'm trying to just phrase this in a way that makes somewhat sense outside of my own head. Just kind of what shifted, or how was she able to be quote unquote okay when she was younger, but it didn't come out until she was 7? Was she living sick or did it develop over time, if that makes sense?
So she was perfectly fine. I mean, I didn't see any of the signs, like it just came out of nowhere. I've learned that there's different things that can trigger it in children. It doesn't mean they're going to get it, but if it's kind of like somebody told me this and the light kind of went on, which makes it really simple to understand it. You know how when you get chicken pox, you could have shingles that's hiding away in there and it's waiting for you to get nervous or get something, a life change will happen, menopause or whatever, and then it comes out. So the endocrinologist told us that there are many people that have the diabetes gene, so to speak, inside them, and it just stays dormant their whole life. And I think with my daughter, it was in there and she had gotten ill. She had gotten ill and she had back to back antibiotics. And I think it may have triggered that, but nobody really has an answer. Nobody knows for sure, but she was perfect until her diabetes diagnosis.
That analogy does make a lot of sense, especially not to kind of switch gears, but because you then realized that you had diabetes as an adult after you'd raised your daughter as her caregiver. You then, do you feel like it aligned with a major life change, like we were just kind of chatting?
Well, for me, I remember back after I had her with gestational diabetes, I was young. And I just remember the doctor's comment that he made to me saying, since you had gestational diabetes, you might want to, just be mindful and make sure you look out for it later in life. So I kind of put that on the back burner and I really didn't worry about it. I went through menopause early. So at 40, I started showing signs of menopause, the night sweats, the bouncing hormones. The doctors are like, wow. You shouldn't be going into this so early and we're worried about your bone density. And I'm like, great. So I was out on vacation. And you know how when you go out on vacation, you just enjoy every food you want or any beverage that you want, and you just relaxing and enjoying yourself. So I'm eating food that I normally don't eat. And I was drinking like a strawberry daiquiri or one of those sugary beach kind of drinks. And I noticed that I had to go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. And in the back of my mind, I'm going, this doesn't feel right. What's going on? And so I took the time after about the seventh bathroom trip in 2 hours. I'm like, it smells fruity, right? And I remember that smell when my daughter had a high glucose level, that fruity smell when she peed. And so I went to the Long's Drugs and I got a glucometer, and anybody can get them. They're over the counter. That's what you use to stick your finger. They come with like 5 or 6 strips. And I pricked my finger and it was over 300. My blood sugar was over 300, and I was in Florida, and I thought, wow, something is definitely wrong. So the next morning, I took a flight out and I went to see my doctor, and they told me it looks like you have type 2 diabetes, where your pancreas isn't making enough insulin. And I'm like, okay. So I dieted, I watched my food, I did everything they told me to do, and I still couldn't get my blood sugar down. And so they ran some tests, and then they informed me that I had late onset diabetes, which happens over the age of 30, but it's type 1. And basically, it's an autoimmune response. So, type 1 diabetes attacks the immune system very quickly, and you go from being okay to having type 1 pretty quickly. Late onset diabetes is a slow kill. So, it usually happens over a year and goes unnoticed. And that's why sometimes it's misdiagnosed as type 2. So that's when my journey began with the pump and everything that you need to manage your own diabetes. But Jillian, it was such an eye opener for me. And I'm really blessed because it gave me a different mindset on it. So I remember sitting in the doctor's office and I was just losing it. I'm a pretty composed woman, but I was just losing it in the doctor's office. And the doctor said, "You raised a daughter. What is going on here? You know about diabetes." And the amount of grief I was grieving for my little girl. I was grieving for her so hard because I had realized how difficult this chronic illness can be to manage, how much of your mind it takes to manage it. You're looking at carb counting, you're making sure you have your stuff if you go on a hike. I'm like the queen of that now. But when it first happened, I just went back to that little girl and I felt such guilt that I hounded her and you can't have this, you can't have that. You got to be careful. Test your blood sugar before you drive, just everything that a parent does because they're worried. And so that was kind of my awakening journey with my own diagnosis.
You kind of talk about the journey with your daughter. What was that like? Just give us a kind of a glimpse into just how does she go to sleepovers? How did you handle it with her school? Just all those things.
So raising a daughter with type 1 was interesting because back when she was diagnosed, it was during the AIDS epidemic. So everybody was afraid of needles. Everybody was afraid of getting stuck. Everybody was afraid of catching AIDS. And so for her, this beautiful little tenacious girl was never invited to birthday parties. They were afraid of her. There was no on-site school nurse. It was a district nurse that rotated from school to school to school. And so I would have to get in my car and put the pedal to the metal, so to speak, to try to get to her during her lunch hour so I could give her a shot and then get back to work on time. Otherwise,
This was
they
every day.
right, they would ding me if I was late for work because they didn't have all the family laws that they have today. And so I would want to sit with her to say, "Hey, how you doing, sweetie? How's your day going?" But I couldn't. I had to give her shot, give her a hug, and go because I had to get back to work. And then as she grew, I noticed she was just a champion. She started taking responsibility early for her own injections. So before the age of 9, she wanted to give herself her own shot. And that to me was horrifying to see the little girl squeezing her leg and pulling the pushing the plunger. I didn't let it slow her down, even back then. But in the back of my mind, I'm looking at her constantly. I'm watching every move. I'm trying to make sure she has what she needs. As she grew up, she became a cheerleader. And so I'm watching her, on the field having just the time of her life going, "Where's her blood sugar at?" Because I didn't know, because they didn't have all the things they have, if it was dropping or what was going on. And then I'm gonna be 100% transparent. Children start out with a lot of them start out with, "Hey, look at me, I can do this." And then they hit a wall. And I remember her hitting that wall at Christmas time when she was little. We took her to sit on Santa Claus's lap, and I'm thinking, I'm gonna find out what she wants and she's gonna get it. I don't care what I have to do to give it to her. She's had a horrible time, and any child deserves what they should have. And she sat on his lap and she said, "Santa, I want a new pancreas so I don't have to take shots anymore." And as a parent, it shredded me because I couldn't fix it. I couldn't give her what she wanted. And so growing up, watching her grow up, this resilient queen had her ups and downs. The teenage years were pretty rough. The blood sugars were not in as much control as I would have liked to have seen, but I understand now why, and that's part of her journey. And I try to be respectful with that. She didn't miss out on anything. She had incredible joy in her life. I made sure of that. Every single diabetic child out there is just like any other child. They become police officers, they become firemen, they become whoever they came here to be. And a chronic illness like diabetes should not limit anybody on what they came here to be. So, my daughter's childhood, I was a mother making sure it didn't limit her and she could become anything she wanted to be.
I love that, and you've taken that into today. You've taken that into your to actually be your work, your life's work. How is it that you partner with families with diabetic diagnoses?
So people call me the T1 diabetes doula. And a doula steps in when a mom's pregnant and helps her through a journey that she's never been through before in most cases, right? This is what's going to happen with your body when you do this. And then you're going to go into labor and this is what you can expect. And then you're going to bring the baby home and you can expect this. So, what I do for families is nobody can fix it. That's impossible. Every family is different. They have to walk through their own journey. I stand beside them. I anchor them. I let them know things are going to be okay. If they need a resource, I've been living it for 33 years, so why should you spend 2 weeks trying to find out about that if I already know about it? I I give them hope. I think that their child will be okay. And the one thing that's most important to me is making sure that mom and even dad have the support that they need so that they can support their children. That I don't give medical advice. They hear enough of it. I don't talk about bolus and basal and do this and do that. They go to the endocrinologist and they walk out of the office with everything that they need, whether they like it or not. I talk about the mom and talk with the mom that's worried to go get her nails done because it might be an hour without being close to her newly diagnosed child. Or the mom who's had a child that's hit the teens and now the sugars are bouncy because of the hormonal change. And she's worried because she's worried about the long term effects of what's going on with her teenager. I sit with the mom who feels like she's losing herself because she's so focused on what's happening with her child and wants to make sure they're okay. I sit with that worried mom and I remind her that her life matters too. You cannot pour from a cup that is half full. And when you're a T1D mom and your cup is constantly half full, and then you hit a bump in the road, you can't give your child what they might need. And so self care is number one to me. It's huge. So we talk about things like, okay, why are you up all night with your child? What's going on? Let's talk about how you can maybe sleep a little bit more at ease while your child sleeps so that when you wake up, you don't feel like you've been to a Vegas at the age of 21 for the first time, which is, they often do because they're worried sick, even though, their child is fine. So I offer that. And then there's different settings. Some parents are kind of private about what's going on in their family. So I talk to them one on one if that's what they prefer. Or I just created a forum that I felt was hugely necessary. And it's called T1D Unfiltered, and I'm gathering groups of families to come together so that they can talk too. And I created this setting in the hopes that when people start to land there, they don't have to explain anything because everybody in that group already knows.
This. I love that you're offering not only just the soft side, the emotional, the family relationship, but also bringing your knowledge of the process, how to explain what the different pumps, how to explain this, the hardware that the endocrinologist maybe gave the family. I know when you're at the doctor, they're giving you all this information and you're trying to absorb it, and then you get home and you're like, "What just happened?" And you're trying to Google it and you don't know what you're Googling is correct. And so I like that you're able to kind of cover both sides of that for folks because that's a unique skill there.
It is. And I even do things like I'm not here with all the answers, but I'll get them because I know how to get them. So I listen to the parents to figure out what they need. If they need more information about service dogs, I have one. If they need more information about diabetes camps, I know where to get that. So there is some information that I can gather, but I don't structure anything. So what I mean by that is why sit there for an hour and talk about a subject that nobody needs? I let them drive it. So I usually talk to parents and say, what is it that you need? And okay, let's talk about that. I'll make sure that when we meet next week, we can, and then I gather whatever they need and we go through it and they come out and they feel lighter. And that's my goal is to make every single family feel lighter.
Love that. And then that you offer individual and group. I love that because sometimes people don't want to feel alone. They want to feel like they've got a community around them. I get that. And then there's those that like something more one on one. I get that too. And so if folks are looking to work with someone like you, where can they find you online? What are your different platforms?
So they can find me through Facebook. They can find me on Instagram. I'm very active on Instagram. And then they can also go to my website, and it's t1diabetesdoula.com. A lot of information on my Instagram. I've got reels. You can find everything out about me on my website. Click on the little links. So those are the best places to go. And I do respond to instant messages. And anybody who just has questions, they can meet with me for 30 minutes for free. They just have to send the request in. 30 minutes for free. There's no pressure. I don't do that. They have enough pressure. It's just to find out who they are. And even if they just need that 1 30 minutes and I never talk to them again, I like, wow, I've touched a parent and they don't feel like they're alone. So that's how they can reach me.
That, and we'll drop all that in the show notes for y'all so you can follow up with our friend here if you have type 1 diabetes or you just got a diagnosis or maybe someone in your in your social circle is going through this. It's not something that we talk about a lot. Like if someone has cancer, where everybody talks about it. If someone has, kind of these big thing, or if someone, breaks a limb, but you don't hear people talking about, "Oh, I just had a diabetes diagnosis." And so it's gotta feel very isolating and, to know and also probably scary to navigate, and so to have you is such a gift. With that, what do you wanna leave our listeners with today?
I would like to leave every parent, or maybe you're an auntie or an uncle or best friend, and you know somebody who has a newly diagnosis. So you're sitting across a table with a mom that looks tired because her teenager's just given her a run for the money, even though they've had it for 8 years, right? I want to leave everybody with hope and the feeling that they're not alone out there. They're absolutely not alone. There are so many families out there struggling or navigating diabetes. And there are also many families that are seeing the joy in raising their children to be incredible people. And I want them to know that if today they're just feeling like, I can't do this, they can do it. They absolutely can. And their children are going to grow up into amazing adults. And that's what I would like for them to know today.
I think that messaging could resonate for anyone that's listening or going through any number of things. I try to remind myself just how kind we need to be to each other. Just the person in front of you in the grocery line may have just gotten a diabetes diagnosis for her or her child, and that's why she's going slowly through her purse, and, just little thing like and so I think I love that we continue to talk about these things and raise awareness and yeah, meet ourselves where we are. I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing this and opening eyes. Whether we have a diagnosis or not, it opened my eyes to kind of ways I could be a supporter for someone that maybe is going through something like this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.